Perfect. Okay, great stuff. Sweet. Well, we'll make a start then, and hopefully we can give you all something to think about and take away with you all this evening. Big thank you all for joining us. Just for anybody that I haven't met around the room today, and it's always great to see new people as well. It's been one of the things I've missed about this year actually, has been getting out and meeting people for the first time. But my name's Ben. I run a little company in Northampton called So Very Creative. We work across a whole different range of areas, website, social media, graphic design, much the same to coin a phrase that you use, Melanie, a bit of a jack of all trades really. We've been working across a range of different areas over recent years, and we've done so in quite a diverse range of different businesses really. Travel and tourism, we work quite closely with Karen at the Destination Then Valley project, and we're supporting their Recovery Through Enterprise program at the moment as well, right down to a range of really interesting niches locally, specialist cleaning, logistics, food and drink, kind of a really diverse base really. But what I think that's kind of helped us to do over the years is to actually develop kind of a fairly robust set of kind of skills and experiences that has enabled us to learn, we think, quite a lot from our different clients in different areas, and hopefully it's given us quite a broad kind of experience to be able to kind of talk to you in a session like this, you know, and be able to talk to you from our kind of collective experiences and stuff over the years. Just in terms of today and how we're going to break it out, I've tried to tackle our presentation this afternoon in as logical a method as we can. Obviously, it's quite a big playing field when we talk about online events, so I was conscious of kind of overloading and making it too unwieldy and complicated. So hopefully it'll be fairly straightforward and easy to follow as we go through. What I will say is, I know there is the live chat in Zoom, but well, I tend to find on my laptop screen, which is a little small, running the presentation and the little video mosaic down the side, it makes answering questions in the live chat a bit of a difficulty actually. So what I would say is, if anyone's got any questions as we go along, obviously there'll be some time at the end that I'll open it up, and you're more than welcome to kind of ask any questions and stuff then. But I always say to people, I'd hate for someone to go an hour through a session and be like, actually, I don't understand any of this because I misunderstood something kind of early on. So if I do say something or I kind of go off on a bit of a tangent that you're not sure on, or you just want to clarify something before we kind of move on, feel free to kind of unmute and ask questions and stuff as we go along, and I'm more than happy to kind of take those as we go really. I like to try and be as kind of interactive and back and forth as possible. So yeah, if you've got anything to kind of contribute or to ask or anything as we go along, then feel free to chime in as we go. In terms of our objectives today, really there were three that I wanted to hopefully give you to walk away with. The first is that really I thought it was important that we all start to kind of understand the key kind of questions and considerations that we need to kind of take into account when we're putting our kind of online events together. One theme that I'm going to hit on quite a lot as we kind of go through these slides over the next hour or so is kind of the importance of a really structured plan in a few different areas to make the event as successful as possible. So really want to get you thinking about those kind of key areas and questions that you need to be thinking about. Ideally, you know, when we walk away today, I'd like to think that you'll have some ideas and solid takeaways to be able to go and start to put some strategies together for yourself and actually look at delivering some kind of online experiences for yourself and in your own businesses and organizations. And that's where my third objective comes in actually, is being able to keep tabs on what you're up to over the following weeks and months that follow, and hopefully enjoy some fun events as you, with a bit of luck, crossing his fingers he says, put some of these skills and knowledge to use over the coming months and weeks as well. So with that in mind, we'll crack on then. What I like to try and do, I always try and approach these sessions in as accessible a way as possible. I'm honestly a bit of a nerd and a geek when it comes to these kind of things. As a result, I do have a tendency sometimes of switching into kind of lingo and tough stuff like that, but I always try and keep these sessions as accessible as possible, so I'm not kind of overloading you guys with kind of technical jargon that is just going to kind of complicate the matter. So just a few kind of terms and stuff that I wanted to mention before we jump in, just so when they come up on some of the slides later on, everyone's kind of on the same page. Obviously, live stream, as I'm sure most of you probably understand, is kind of generally some kind of a live video feed generated in one place and consumed by people, usually in real time, kind of wherever they'll be, you know, whether that be on a local scale, if we were putting together something with a very localized audience, right up to people watching kind of live stream videos of, you know, bands and theatre performances and stuff this year from all over the world, you know, and it's enabled people to make those kind of content and events and stuff really accessible to people that ordinarily might not have been able to kind of experience them for themselves. Two terms in the middle here that we're going to touch on very briefly, but only really to talk about why we're not going to talk about them more. Two terms that you'll hear quite a lot in terms of kind of online experiences sometimes is kind of VR or virtual reality and AR, augmented reality, which are both excellent kind of tools that businesses and marketeers have put to use over recent years for kind of creating quite immersive online experiences. But they do have their drawbacks, which we're going to get to in a few moments' time. I mean, honestly, a virtual reality setup is one that would generally be a fully immersive kind of 3D environment, similar to the picture that you saw on our opening screen of the chap in his big kind of VR goggles. That's where you might have seen kind of videos and stuff, those kind of experiences where using the goggles and the headset and stuff, people are able to actively kind of explore and engage with a custom 3D environment that's put together. Augmented reality is a slightly different approach, and how augmented reality works is it takes kind of the real world, so maybe the camera element of your phone, so users might be scanning the real world environment through the lens of their camera, but what it does is kind of overlay digital and virtual elements onto that, so people can quite literally augment their reality. So for instance, there's a really clever app I use that you can kind of scan the camera phone on literally the horizon, and it will pick out the nearest cash point or petrol station or things like that. So there's some really interesting uses for things like augmented reality as well. Latency is a very technical term, but simply refers to any delays that you might encounter between video and audio. So some of you might have been on Zoom calls at some point this year where someone's mouth's moving, but the words have stopped, or vice versa. That effect is something called latency, and that's something we'll touch on very briefly a little later on. Fidelity, in the terms that we're going to describe it today, refers to kind of the quality of an audio or video signal and how kind of clear or fuzzy for the opposite a particular signal might be. Engagement, we're going to, for our purposes today, engagement will obviously relate to how people interact with our content in social media circles, so likes, comments, shares, views, things like that. And just simply the last one, analytics, as you guys may probably know from your work already day to day, just refers to data on our users and their particular kind of habits and particular demographics as it relates to us and our content that we put out into the world. So hopefully that makes sense moving forward. Like I say, if any of those kind of terms come up, they'll hopefully make sense for you all, and everyone will be on the same page. So in terms of today then, I wanted to start with what constitutes an online event. And online events are quite simply events that take place in a digital space where people are able to kind of connect, communicate, share, and be part of something, even though they're not actually in that location at that particular point in time. As we've seen over this year and over recent years, actually, and as we'll demonstrate over the next few slides, there are many different levels that this kind of event, in quote unquote, can take, really. So whether that be anything from kind of a simple kind of Facebook live stream, or someone going live on their Instagram to interview somebody, right up to much more involved kind of festivals or Christmas fairs and stuff like that. There are numerous different ways that people have been able to kind of take this notion of an online event and create something that actually reflects their own kind of business or service in that digital space. And one of the great things about it, as well, as I've put down at the bottom here, is, you know, a concert traditionally, let's say, will take place at 7:30 in the evening. If you turn up at 9:30, you've probably missed that concert. But obviously the beauty of doing stuff in this online sphere like this is that actually the technology and how we can put it to use enables us to make these kind of content and experiences available for people at any time moving forward as well, actually. So that importance of kind of having people all in the same place at the same time is kind of taken away to a little bit as well. It's important to note this isn't a new kind of phenomenon, really. The first live stream happened on the internet in 1993, and over the years, as you guys will probably know from your kind of day-to-day experiences, these things have becoming more and more prevalent. Certainly over the last kind of 10 years, as social media has become such a big part of the online marketplace as well. There's a few factors that have driven that in reality. Obviously, for one, more people kind of got online at home and were able to kind of take advantage of the internet at home. At the same time, much more people were getting smartphones and getting much more advanced telephone devices in their pockets as well. Tied to that, data has become so much cheaper these days than it used to be first when smartphones first hit the market. It used to be that, you know, even quite expensive mobile phone contracts would get you maybe a couple of gigabytes of data each month. And you'd quickly find, you know, if you're sharing a lot of content on social media or browsing a lot of stuff online, that data can rack up really quickly, and people would end up finding that actually they weren't able to kind of get online and do the stuff that they wanted to. So nowadays, you know, things like unlimited data plans and stuff are so much more commonplace and affordable for people that actually that data consideration has been completely removed as well, and people are free to consume as much content on their mobile phones as they want to. You know, I don't know what your guys' experience has been like this year, but I know there's been days I've been utterly appalled at how long my phone has told me I've spent online surfing the web and doing social media and stuff in a 24-hour period. And the other crucial thing that's kind of driven this kind of increase in virtual events has been that the technology has become really accessible and easy to get into, both for consumers, the people that you would want to come to your events, your concerts, those kind of things, and actually for you as businesses and organizations that are looking to deliver them. It's a significantly easier process now than it was, say, 15 years ago, when actually putting together a live stream broadcast and being able to deliver that to people was a pretty big technical undertaking to actually put the stream together, and quite an expensive operation in terms of making that data available for people to consume as well. So there's been a real kind of confluence of factors over the last kind of 10 years, like I say, turbo driven by the proliferation of social media as well, that has really driven these kind of events to kind of massive kind of occupation in the market. Obviously, this year that's been kicked into quite extreme levels that we, even at the kind of 12 months ago, perhaps hadn't necessarily anticipated. Social distancing and lockdown has meant that all kinds of different things, as you guys will be well aware, have been kind of completely derailed this year. You know, festivals, concerts, all of those kind of events and attractions that have been impacted as a result of people not being able to come and see them and take part in the events that they're putting together in the real world. But on top of that, you know, there are lots of other kind of businesses and groups that have been affected in this way. You know, small vendors and independent businesses that would normally be going to things like Christmas markets at this time of year and those kind of fairs. All of those are kind of completely out of the window for this year. Event organizers have been really kind of struggling to kind of match a latent demand for people that want to be able to kind of deliver events and stuff, and B, for people that actually want to consume them and have something to do. And obviously charities as well, who rely on things like events and in-person gatherings and stuff to do a lot of their fundraising and awareness activities as well. All of these groups have really seen kind of a big impact from not being able to actually get people together in the real world as they normally would. As a result, though, there have been, and I've been saying this to people kind of all year, as much as there is, you know, this element of doom and gloom around, you know, people can't come and see us, businesses are shut, there actually have been a number of really good, I think good, unexpected upsides for businesses that have been prepared to kind of engage and invest in the kind of the technology and the marketing time, really, to put these kind of events together this year. You know, for one, certainly we've noticed with our clients and people that we're coming into contact with on a daily basis, there's a genuine real appetite for local businesses out there at the moment, in terms of both the search terms, the search trends that we're seeing in kind of Google dashboard, but also the anecdotal evidence that we're seeing in talking to businesses, you know, who are finding real increases in people that specifically are seeking them out because they want to find a local option. And businesses have upped their online game quite often, you know, to meet that demand, as we'll look at in a few slides time. Lots of businesses have been forced to kind of pivot to incorporate new services and new ways of delivering their activities as well to people, which actually for a lot of people have ended up kind of being a really good thing. You know, it's actually made them more accessible, it's brought new members into the group, and crucially it meant that they were able to kind of engage and keep people as you know, quote unquote paying customers, even when they weren't able to kind of get them in and see them this year. The other really exciting thing from a marketeer's point of view is that this year has been an incredibly steep learning curve for all of the users that have previously kind of dragged their feet when it comes to adopting some of the new technologies that we're looking at. I mean, Zoom is the classic example that, you know, 12 months ago, you know, my grandma, all of these kind of people would have had no idea what Zoom was, but now are all completely adept at getting online and setting up their kind of bingo call with their mates and all these kind of things. So all of these users that have previously maybe resisted engaging with businesses online, or, you know, talking to businesses on social media, things like that, have actually had those kind of inhibitions forced away from them in lots of ways, actually. And so as a result, as kind of businesses and marketeers, there is a really good kind of opportunity, I think, for us all to be able to hopefully kind of meet some of those newly converted users kind of halfway and deliver something that's really exciting and engaging for them. As we put at the bottom, you know, all cancellation of events and gatherings might be scary for a lot of people for Christmas, but hopefully, as we're going to kind of demonstrate over the slides to come, there are lots of options available to you guys for creating these kind of events and experiences for people on a range of different scales. Now, the first thing to mention, as we alluded to earlier, is that when we talk about this idea of virtual events, the first thing that often comes to mind is these kind of very technical, very immersive environments, which when you see them kind of in walkthroughs and on demonstration videos are incredible. From personal experience, I spent some time over the summer exploring one that was put together for a big guitar trade show in the States. And over there, they had spent, no exaggeration, somewhere in the region of $200,000, $300,000 building this hugely kind of immersive, explorable environment where you can get into it. But even myself, with a fairly good level of kind of technical knowledge and some pretty good equipment, really struggled in some places to actually get that experience to kind of be anything like what the designers had kind of envisaged in their own mind. And there are a number of kind of drawbacks to taking that really kind of flashy, big ticket approach to developing these events. For the first, that, you know, they're incredibly expensive to develop, and I'll talk to you in a second about some kind of ballpark costs that go into these kind of projects. For two, they take an incredibly long time to develop, and as you know, certainly as small businesses or organizations that maybe haven't got massive marketing departments or massive amounts of resource to put into it, then actually planning and just kind of being able to put these events up on their feet becomes a massive drain on resources as well. And as I've just alluded to as well, the problem with them is they're also not particularly accessible in terms of, if you create an environment that requires, you know, a full set of 3D goggles and a decent pair of headphones and a really good quality Wi-Fi to be able to actually make the most of that environment, actually the chances are that the majority of that time and effort you've put into developing that environment is likely going to be wasted, because the users aren't going to be able to engage with it in anything like the way you've imagined. And as a result, you're likely going to end up with, similar to my experience in the summer, you know, quite a high abandonment rate. And as a result, certainly in the short term, when you're trying to justify it to your boss, and certainly in the long term, when it comes to looking at events in the future, it's really difficult to be able to demonstrate any kind of massive ROI on that unless you've had, you know, a genuinely freakish turn of good luck and a couple of really big ticket customers have come through that particular event. Then it just becomes something that actually is almost kind of self-defeating in some ways. I mean, just for some kind of ballpark kind of costs, and again, this is all highly speculative depending on the complexity, but to put together some kind of explorable, kind of immersive 3D environment, as we've talked about, can run people anything between £30,000 and £200,000, depending on the complexity of the build that you were looking to develop. In much the same way, even putting together kind of a simple 2D environment, and I've seen a number of trade shows this year that have been almost kind of based around a giant picture and kind of a carousel of trade show booths that you kind of click through, very kind of static and fixed content, but even something to put together something that's very stripped down in terms of the functionality, you're still looking between £3,000 and £5,000 just to put a system like that on its feet. The opportunity for us as kind of businesses that maybe don't have those kind of budgets available to us is that there are a massive amount of kind of tools and platforms available to you guys that you can actually get to work with very little kind of investment or technical knowledge at your end to actually start putting these kind of events and experiences together for people. As we've seen through this year, there's been a whole range of different examples of how kind of businesses and groups have put together, their own take on creating virtual events. In the education field, we've seen a whole range of kind of classes and tutorials being delivered from gyms, chefs and food producers delivering cooking classes and cook-along sessions. I was talking to a yoga teacher a couple of weeks ago in Northampton who'd been delivering kind of one-to-one and group yoga sessions with her pupils as well. And even, medical services, therapists, private tutors and stuff like that, even through the medium of those guys with, one-to-one video and stuff, they've still been able to generate that similar kind of quality virtual experience for their customers as well, and still be able to kind of keep the lights on. Obviously, webinars and conferences have been very big business this year for virtual marketeers all the way around the world. Obviously, in terms of how you can deliver those kind of webinars and conferences, they're relatively straightforward to put together in terms of, appointing speakers. And as we've seen today, even an idiot like me can share a screen and run people through a presentation for a little while. So it's relatively straightforward to use platforms like kind of Zoom or Microsoft Teams to put those kind of events together. And the great thing about this kind of really dense, hour-long webinars and 40-minute roundtables and that kind of content is that it's actually really sticky and keeps people within the perhaps the confines of your social media pages or your website after the fact really effectively. And as a webmaster, if you've got any kind of content that you can put into your website that's going to guarantee somebody's going to stick around for 30-40 minutes within the confines of your online store on your business's webpage, that webmaster is going to be rubbing their hands together actually, because the longer people spend on your site, the chances of them engaging with you, taking up your calls to action and contacting you for more information and stuff like that actually go through the roof the longer people spend on your site. Clearly, another way that people have been putting the technology to use this year has been kind of the performance field as well. Obviously, musicians, theatres, all those kind of guys have been completely unable to kind of get out and put together their normal kind of offering for people. And as a result, we've seen all kinds of different kind of utilizations of people putting together fairly straightforward live stream performances, so musicians delivering concerts from home, or even kind of group guitar lessons from home on Facebook Live. I've personally watched the cast of TV shows do script readings via a Zoom window. Patrick Stewart's been doing daily readings of a sonnet a day on his Instagram live channel. I've even seen TV shows that have been filmed in the woods of Canada, during the lockdown period when people weren't able to get into the studio. So there has genuinely been a massive kind of uptick in terms of really interesting kind of content. And quite often, if it's a single musician or somebody that's maybe, doing a solo reading or something like that, then again, the barriers to putting up that kind of performance are genuinely very little. If you've got a phone, if you've got a laptop, you've genuinely got all the access points that you need to be able to kind of put that stuff together. And kind of wider than that, you guys will have seen, as well as kind of some of the main areas that we've looked at over those last couple of slides, businesses have been really creative this year in terms of how they've been able to use some of these tools to actually put together things for their customers. I've seen quiz nights taking place. My neighbours have been attending church services that have been live streamed and stuff in real time. I've been involved in putting up wine tastings for businesses where they've had, 7 or 8 people all dialing in for a virtual wine tasting. And even venues that have been, completely closed, museums and art galleries and stuff like that, have taken the time to actually be able to offer, guided tours with experts and interviews with staff members and stuff like that, and generate content that, during the ordinary day-to-day running of things, perhaps they wouldn't necessarily be able to offer to people. But in the absence of those people having to be stood behind the customer service desk answering questions and stuff, actually they're able to put the time into developing and delivering some of this meaningful content that people have been actively crying out for. So in terms of getting going, I've just noticed what a terrifying picture that is from that lady's face as she's starting there. She looks pretty fierce. I'm going to move on from there. Before we start, obviously, I do get kind of a number of fairly kind of common questions that people always want to ask when we start talking about how we can kind of put together kind of events and happenings for people online. And I wanted to kind of dispel some of those myths right from the off, really, so that we can all kind of approach, the slides slides that follow, hopefully relatively comfortably and without any degree of nervousness. But the first question is, obviously, is some kind of live stream event going to cost me a lot? And the honest answer to that is no, it absolutely doesn't have to at all. As we get towards a later part of the presentation, I've got a few slides of recommendations for some products and systems that are worthwhile you looking at if you guys are interested in putting events on. But again, for one, none of it is strictly essential. It's all stuff that I feel kind of bolsters any event that you're looking to put together. But B, it's all stuff that crucially, even if you did decide you were looking at putting, you know, a modest investment into some bits of equipment and stuff to be able to facilitate something like this, none of what I'm going to kind of explain and lay out for you guys today is anything like an expensive item or kind of a big ticket investment for you guys. Second thing people always want to know is, actually, can we record it in advance rather than it being live? Again, the honest answer to this is generally there are lots of occasions when yes, we can, you know, you can record content that is quote unquote live, but do it in advance and just deliver it to people at a particular moment in time. Some people are very happy kind of sat in front of a camera and just kind of talking at will, as I'm demonstrating here. Some people aren't, you know, quite as comfortable. You know, they feel like maybe they'd like that safety blanket of being able to, you know, perhaps do a line a couple of different times or get their final kind of push the camera out in a way that they're happy with. And lots of the platforms that we're going to kind of talk about today, you know, Facebook, YouTube, they all offer you the ability to upload content in advance and premiere it at a particular time and date as well. So there's no reason that it necessarily has to be done as a live event. Third one, people always are curious to find out what kind of equipment and stuff you guys are going to need to actually start putting something like this together. And the honest answer to that is very little. You know, if you've got a laptop, if you've got a mobile phone, you've genuinely got all of the tools that you'll need, certainly, to be able to start putting on things, even on quite a small scale. You know, as I'll allude to when we get to the relevant section, there are kind of slightly more higher spec bits of equipment that you can take and invest in if this is something that you're going to be doing, you know, regularly, or you know, actually this is going to be a significant part of our marketing mix over the next 12 months, say. You know, you can buy cameras that will live stream to Facebook from the camera itself and stuff, and things like that will be very useful. But actually, I've tried to root all of what we're going to talk about today in very simple kind of processes, very simple platforms and tools, so that it is hopefully as accessible for you guys as possible. And the last one I always get asked is it complicated? And, you know, it is a very straightforward process, as I alluded to in an earlier slide. All of the kind of the technology that is available now on the marketplace has been generally designed to be as simple as possible for people to get to grips with and get to work with, and to not require, you know, massive amounts of cost or, crucially, massive amounts of, you know, technical knowledge. Because, you know, I don't know individually what all of your roles are today, but I imagine it's not specifically, you know, a website coder or someone that's got, you know, specific huge amounts of detailed technical knowledge. So I've tried to make all of this as you know, straightforward and as accessible as possible for you guys. So the first thing we always kind of start to consider when we're looking at putting together any kind of live event with our clients is to put together some kind of a plan. Honestly, this kind of plan document that we like to try and formulate with our clients is often the most important thing when it comes to kind of guiding you and your team through the process of setting up, delivering, and hopefully capitalizing on a successful event as well. So when we're starting to put our plan together, it's really important that we start to kind of ask ourselves a series of really important questions that over time will help to shape really the framework of what our event is going to look like. So obviously it's going to shape how we create the content, how we deliver it, how people consume the content, and where they'll be able to consume the content. And also, crucially, what that plan should take into account is how you're planning on promoting the event as well. Obviously, the danger with doing something in an online world is that there are innumerable million distractions on the internet, between cat videos on YouTube and the news and Twitter and God knows what else. Once you start having to kind of compete with all of those kind of time drains with people to come and spend time in the events that you guys are putting putting together, then yeah, actually maximizing your awareness in advance and really kind of promoting it to the best of your abilities is oftentimes a more important indicator of kind of how successful an event was or is than actually, you know, how many people, you know, potentially streamed it or bought something off the back of it afterwards. So when we're making that plan, the first thing we like to try and kind of ask clients and get people to think about is what kind of experience is it that we're actually trying to deliver? So, you know, are we trying to put on, you know, a musical performance? Is it going to be a talk from an expert in a particular area? Is it likely to be some kind of a roundtable discussion, perhaps with multiple partners, all needing the ability to kind of contribute to that discussion? Obviously, we'll need to think about how long that event is going to be. There's kind of a few considerations to weigh into that. Obviously, to start with, you know, you want to make sure that the event you're putting on, you know, does it justice, and make sure that you're able to explore your particular topic or whatever in a particular way. But also, crucially, what you don't want to be doing is, you know, thinking to myself, well, I'm going to put together a 4-hour event that, you know, kicks off at 7:30 p.m. and actually is potentially going to be a real issue for somebody to be a part of and engage with for, you know, 4 hours. So actually thinking about how long that event should be and how you're going to be able to kind of engage and keep people interested for that time period is going to be a really important question to ask. Thirdly, obviously, you need to think about from your side who's going to be involved in the event. Obviously, depending on, you know, the format and what you're actually trying to deliver, the complexity in terms of, you know, how many people need to be involved will vary. If you're just delivering a webinar like I am this evening, you know, then actually I can do this all myself. I just sit in front of a camera and I get rolling. Actually, if I was sat here, I'm not going to subject you to my singing, but if I was to sit here, you know, with a guitar off the wall here behind me singing a song for you guys, you know, actually that's perhaps going to need a second pair of hands on hand, so that maybe somebody can be able to take control of engaging with people on social media or asking questions in the live chat and stuff that I can't physically do as a result of being able to, you know, because I'm sat playing the guitar and singing to you guys. Similarly, it might be that you're offering some kind of a guided tour around a museum, say. In that instance, it might be that actually you've got a person in front of the camera who's actually doing the presenting, and a second person who's obviously then the person responsible for holding the camera and making sure that they're kind of following all the way around and getting everybody in shot. So important to think right off the bat, kind of where who you're going to have kind of involved in the event, and make sure that everybody kind of understands what their part in that process is and what they're going to physically need to do on the day. Another important thing for reasons that we will come to in a couple of slides' time, the actual venue of where you will be broadcasting from will also need to be something that you'll need to have a think about, not only in terms of is there any technical limitations in place that will prevent us from running our event in the way that we'd like to, but obviously crucially there'll be some kind of environmental factors that we're going to touch on in a few slides as well that you guys will need to take into consideration when looking at venues as well. Important to think about when people will consume the content. You know, some people like to make the content available on demand so that people can consume it on their own time whenever they want to. Some people like to try and make it actually available live at a particular time and capitalize on that moment of people all being kind of in the same digital space all at the same time. Some people like to do both, you know, and what decision you guys make on that will ultimately, you know, be dependent on what your kind of purposes are for putting these kind of events on, and ultimately what you're hoping to achieve with them as well. Important to think about what kind of time of day you're looking to be holding the event as well. Obviously, not only in terms of making sure that obviously you're available, the people that you need to work on the broadcast with you are available, but also crucially that your audience are available as well. You know, if it turns out that actually your whole audience tends to only be online between 8 and 10 p.m, then putting something on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, again, will feel kind of a little self-defeating. So important to take some time to think about actually when is going to be the most effective time of day to be putting the event on. And then obviously the other question to link to how people and when people will consume the content comes down to, is this event going to be free for people to access, or will people need to pay for the event as well? Obviously, depending on you know, which option you guys decide to take, there are implications one way or the other in terms of services that you'll need to obviously have in place, with it perhaps a ticketing software, and we'll come to stuff like that later. Or again, you know, if it is free and actually the name of the game is getting people just watching a particular event, and you know, visibility is the name of the game, then actually something like Facebook or YouTube, where you've got that kind of audience, would perhaps be the preferable option. Crucially, when we talk about where people will consume the content, when I talk about where, obviously, initially, certainly for the next couple of weeks, people are probably going to be consuming content in their living room at home. But for the purposes of our kind of slides here today, when I talk about where people will consume the content, what we're talking about here in reality is which platform you're looking to host that event on. So whether you're looking to deliver it via Zoom, or whether Facebook Live or YouTube, kind of physically which services you're going to engage to host the event on. And it's worth noting as well that obviously with some software and some kind of configurations, it is more than possible to broadcast actually on multiple platforms at the same time. So if you wanted to, you know, generate a live feed that was available to people within Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and stuff all at the same time, then there are lots of options available for you to do that as well. And crucially as well, you might want to think about whether people or not will be able to access the content after the event has finished as well. Obviously things like kind of performances and those kind of performances, people are going to be really interested in those after the fact that the event has closed as well. So maybe have a think about what your kind of post-event plan is as well, in terms of making content available as videos on YouTube, or whether you want to get a page set up within your website that can act as kind of a hub for this kind of content moving forward as well. So hopefully what this should do is give us something of a brief in terms of, you know, the event that we want to put together. As I say, touching on, you know, the date and time, the format of the event, which platform we're going to look to put that event on via, and again, some of the specifics and the nuts and bolts that will start to inform some of the action points that you guys have got over the months and weeks running into your event. So whether that be, you know, creating Facebook events, you know, setting up a social media plan, all those kind of things as well. Hopefully this plan will give you a really neat, kind of clean document to work from, that hopefully makes the whole process of delivering these kind of events fairly straightforward. In terms of pre-event tasks, there's obviously a few really important areas that we always try and make people aware of and get them thinking about right from the off. As we've touched on already, it's super important to make sure that everyone that's going to be involved in the event is kind of fully involved and understands what they're doing right from the off. I had an event with a client a few weeks ago where they were trying to deliver a virtual demonstration in like a Dragon's Den style kind of event. Did a huge amount of kind of planning with them, scripted it, rehearsed it and everything else, but then 5 minutes before the actual event was due to take place, somebody new was substituted in that had to do the broadcast with me, and it meant that all of that kind of planning went completely to pot, and actually the whole thing ended up being a bit of a disaster, if I'm brutally honest with you. So making sure that you've got everyone involved and they understand kind of what they're doing as part of that process right off the bat is absolutely crucial. One thing I always make sure people have got the time to do, if they can, is to allow time to test everything and do a dry run before your event if possible as well. Your absolute nightmare scenario is a situation where, you know, you put together a flawless social media plan, you generate a huge amount of interest, and everybody in Earthingborough is tuned in waiting for your live stream event, and then actually it takes 10 minutes to get the thing up and on its feet, and by the time you do, half of Earthingborough has disappeared to go and watch Gogglebox or whatever is on the telly that night instead, you know. So actually carving out an hour or 2 hours in the run up to your event to actually sit down, set up your broadcast or your event as you would, you know, if you were doing it live, and literally walking through the steps of testing it and running through that broadcast the first time is genuinely some of the most important time you can spend in all of this kind of process. We always say really important, even when you are kind of planning your events and really first getting into the process for the first time, super important that you put steps in place to kind of measure your engagement and audience through the campaign as well. When I talk about the campaign, obviously I'm talking from when you start promoting your event right the way through to maybe a week and a half after the event when you conclude that follow-up activity. It's really important to make sure that you are kind of monitoring that and keeping an eye on things as you go, you know. So I'm going to mention a couple of tools specifically as we get to some later slides, but make sure you've got things like your analytics set up on your website, that you're keeping a good close eye on things like your social media mentions and your incoming feeds and stuff as well, to make sure that actually when you finish your event and you sit down to work out how effective it was afterwards, you've actually got some real data to be able to draw on, you know, in terms of how many people visited, how many people stayed to the end of the broadcast, how much engagement there was on social media. If you're measuring things like your clout score, which is, you know, how your brand stacks up to other brands comparatively in terms of being a social media kind of authority, then there's all kinds of kind of measures and stuff that you can put in place that mean actually you can define relatively easily after the fact whether or not an event has been a success, and either A, look to replicate that wholesale and have another successful event a few weeks down the line, or B, obviously potentially identify, you know, what's gone wrong and where you can put steps into place to mean that actually you don't have the same issue moving forward, you know. And finally, the other thing, as I've kind of touched on already, but the most important thing I think often with these kind of virtual events, almost as important as the actual content of the event themselves, is to make sure that you guys have got enough time to properly promote that event and make sure that you've maximized every opportunity to get eyeballs on your content and, you know, the hard work that you've put into actually putting these kind of events together. So in terms of where we should be hosting our event, I wanted to put a few slides together that just kind of broadly looked at some of the options that are available to you to start thinking about, you know, where could we be actually looking to create and put these kind of things on for ourselves. Obviously, the first place that I always kind of recommend people investigate is social media, and live streaming has become a really important baked-in part of that ecosystem over recent years. So obviously, Twitter and Facebook were two of the first that kind of really led the vanguard of people integrating live video into their social media feeds. And last time I saw a statistic on it, which was a couple of days ago, I was reading that live video has got 6 times more engagement than a regular video update that goes out into social media. And it actually gets weighted significantly more importantly in people's news feeds than just a video that gets, you know, scheduled at a particular moment in time. The way obviously those kind of algorithms within things like Facebook work is that they tend to kind of prioritize the most kind of pressing, urgent, now kind of content right at the top of your newsfeed. So the most recent updates that have come through. So in that regard, you know, if Facebook is looking down a whole long list of content that Ben can possibly see at the top of his newsfeed and sees that there's a live video happening, actually the chances are that that's the piece of content that's going to drop right at the top of my newsfeed, because Facebook sees that content as super valuable and something that people would genuinely have kind of a real engagement with. So certainly they're two right off the bat that you guys can be kind of making use of. Instagram over the last couple of years again has become much more integrated with live streaming as well, and people have been able to make some really interesting kind of events happen with the Instagram live this year. Obviously in terms of kind of engagement, it's great. People have got the ability to ask questions and comment and stuff on your stream, so it's a really two-way format. You know, if you're doing maybe a question and answer session or a guided tour, it's really easy to be able to take questions from the people that you're broadcasting to and have that kind of two-way engagement with people. Obviously, Snapchat and TikTok are two slightly newer apps on the marketplace, and two that certainly tend to skew much younger in terms of their demographics. I wouldn't want to assume the demographics that you guys are potentially putting events on for moving forward, but yeah, there's certainly ones that tend to skew a little bit younger in terms of their demographic. LinkedIn has very recently introduced things like live video and live stories as well. I'll be honest, I find LinkedIn a really irritating place to be at the best of times. So the prospect of watching a load of live videos in that mix as well, I'm personally not 100% sure on, but it's certainly something that LinkedIn think, again, following Facebook's example, that they think it's going to become a really important part of their kind of ecosystem over the coming years as well. And obviously all of that is without mentioning YouTube, which is obviously the #1 repository of video content in the world. And actually, crucially, the second biggest search engine in the world. world, when you look at the volume of search queries that go through it, YouTube significantly dwarfs all of the other search engines outside of Google by a significant factor. So actually making sure that you've got kind of content and live video and stuff in that mix as well is kind of another area that's it's kind of video 101 really, and kind of live video 101. Oh, my apologies, sorry, talking too long already.
Ben, can I just ask quickly? I'll give you a break from talking to ask a question.
Sure.
I've just added you on LinkedIn just to annoy you, but that's not what I wanted to say.
Sure.
With your previous slide, obviously you're talking about all the different platforms, Facebook and YouTube and things, and I've seen where people have gone live, like Jay's virtual pub quiz is the classic one that everyone's got involved with in lockdown.
Yeah.
And he broadcasts on Facebook and YouTube, Facebook Live and YouTube at exactly the same time.
Yes.
And I just wanted to very quickly, you might well be getting onto this, sorry if you are, but I just wondered about whether it's possible to do that without having a third bit of software or website that like we've used Buffer to try and do dual posting of just normal social media posts in the past, but I wondered if you can live stream on Facebook and YouTube at the same time without having that third party.
There's a few ways of doing it, yeah. And the thing when you're setting up the live streams and stuff is that they will tend to have they'll generate some kind of fairly unique codes and stuff, like the keys and the IDs and stuff. Generally, it's a case of just kind of joining those up and making sure that your kind of authorization information has been kind of inputted into the right areas. It sounds really lame, but it's just a series of increasingly well hidden options in the settings menu. There are some third-party interfaces that you can plug everything kind of into and just kind of leave it set. I'll pop you a link over via LinkedIn to have a look at, so that you can look at some options. But yeah, there is a way that you can kind of bake them in essentially one to the other and kind of hard code them so that actually you don't have to go through that kind of third-party interface as well. But if you just added me on LinkedIn, yeah, more than happy. I'll pop you some links over so you can have a look. And actually, funny enough, I was helping someone with it a couple of weeks ago. I found a really useful how-to guide, because rather than me have to keep showing him 10 times, I thought, here you go, this will save you a whole lot of time. And actually found him a really good kind of step-by-step that walked him through. So my apologies, walked him through those steps of just working out, more than anything, it's which of the really long impenetrable string of characters you need to be putting in which box, to be completely honest with you. But once you understand how they kind of relate to each other, you can generally just kind of leave them and mean that the next time you press the red button, you're automatically going in a bunch of different places.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool, no worries. Obviously, there are a multitude of reasons why social media platforms make for such a good hub for your guys' events. For one, obviously, it's a massive audience. When you look at the user penetration that platforms like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube have got, I'm almost kind of, I have to kind of shake my head when people instantly want to do something else, because my instinct is to say, well, if 90% of the world's population is on these platforms, putting these events on these platforms again is going to be the easiest, simplest way of you reaching those people and making it as accessible as possible. So certainly the audience is one. Obviously, you've got a lot of inbuilt kind of events functionality and stuff. Certainly within Facebook, you can create kind of Facebook events and stuff like that, become really important kind of tools to be able to kind of keep it visible in people's minds and kind of spur engagement in the run up to events and stuff as well. Between all of the various social platforms and the kind of the story based kind of content that you can generate in things like Facebook and Snapchat and stuff as well, there is a whole range of different ways that you can kind of be promoting the event in the run up, running sneak peek little broadcasts, or maybe going live and talking people through what to expect from the event, creating really nice kind of branded graphics. There's all kinds of ways that you can be kind of creating really nice, interesting content and sharing them with people in the run up to events as well. Obviously, things like Facebook and Instagram have got e-commerce options baked into them now as well. So obviously, if you're an online business that has potentially got products that people can be kind of selling, buying via those kind of platforms and stuff as well, then again, putting an event on in them helps people to kind of join that circle as well. To use the analogy, putting the event on helps to bring someone through the shop door, and then, you know, the name of the game then is kind of capitalizing on that. So if you've got things like e-commerce built into your Facebook page, your Instagram page and stuff as well, then it's another great way of being able to put those kind of products in front of people as well. And crucially, as I put in at the bottom, as well as, you know, what we might want to get out of an event and how we might want to tackle an event if we were a business putting something on, it needs to be as accessible and easy as possible for Joe Blow walking down the street, or, you know, my mum to be able to pick up her phone and get involved with it, you know. My mum is the least techie person in the world, and even she's managed to get involved in all kinds of stuff this year. And that's where Facebook is great, you know, everybody understands how Facebook works. Growing numbers understand how things like YouTube and Twitter and Instagram work and stuff. And so as a result, in terms of being able to meet users halfway and make it really kind of easy for people, social media is genuinely the ideal kind of starting place for you guys to be looking at. Obviously, in terms of slightly wider uses, things like conferencing software has also become a really useful tool for this year. Not only have people been using things like Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams for, you know, traditional webinars and conferences and things like that, but actually that functionality of being able to, you know, have multiple people dialing in and contributing to the same kind of discussion or conversation has actually allowed for all kinds of different uses and stuff as well. And I gave the examples on some earlier slides of people doing, you know, cast readings of TV scripts and, you know, dramatic performances of Hamlet and all kinds of stuff using that very simple setup of a number of different video frames all within one simple kind of black screen. The great thing about it, obviously, is that it's become really kind of ubiquitous this year for lots of people, even people that weren't, you know, doing anything in the way of kind of online conferencing or anything this year have been able to get to grips with, you know, usually if not Zoom, then at least Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something as well. And for you guys as hosts, obviously, the ability to be able to put these kind of things on for free is great, because it means, you know, that there's none of the massive kind of investment to be able to put these kind of happenings on. It's something that you can potentially look at kind of trialing and testing and adapting on quite an affordable basis moving forward. Obviously, the ability to have up to, you know, hundreds of people all in the same place is a big boon, and something that, you know, within Facebook, it's very much, you know, kind of a one-way video stream followed by, you know, the replies coming in comments and stuff like this. But obviously, the conferencing software does give people a much more kind of interactive two-way interface to work within. And, you know, to touch on the accessibility point that we mentioned a moment ago as well, obviously the other great thing is that all of these platforms have now got really good mobile apps for people to put to use as well. So even if you were looking to jump onto, you know, perhaps doing an event in one of these slightly more kind of involved platforms, actually from a user point of view, it's still incredibly easy and incredibly accessible to be able to kind of get on and engage with those events as well. I'm going to flag Zoom up as a specific example, because I say to people all the time, of all of the stock I wished I'd bought in 2019, Zoom is the one. I tell you, the people at Skype and Microsoft Teams this year must be sat with their head in their hands, because Zoom have taken their lunch without a doubt in 2020. And to be honest with you, there's a few really good reasons for that. And the number one is that the onboarding and sign-up process is absolutely seamless. It's so straightforward to be able to get into a Zoom meeting. Even if you're not a registered user and got an account, it's still incredibly easy and accessible. And that has been the number one thing that has led to it being such a widely kind of proliferated tool this year. From your side, again, as I've mentioned, lots of people have got kind of experience on it. So it's one that is rapidly becoming a platform that people are very happy to be kind of engaged in and to spend time within. Obviously, depending on the format of the business, of the event that you're looking to deliver, you've got the ability to deliver kind of secure private rooms and kind of fence that content off from people that you wouldn't necessarily want to see it. But also at the same time, you know, it's got the ability to actually open those kind of broadcasts up and stuff as well. So there are options within Zoom, for instance, to be able to stream live to YouTube and Facebook from your live Zoom room. So it's a really useful way of kind of building it into perhaps a wider kind of streaming ecosystem if you are looking to kind of deliver things on multiple platforms. from a branding point of view, it's got the ability to add your own kind of custom branding on some of the paid levels as well, which might be of use to businesses that are looking to make more of their kind of branding and position and stuff as well. And if you're, you know, a festival organizer or a conference organizer, the other thing that it does do really well is you can break out multiple rooms, have different kind of events and conversations happening all at the same kind of time, all under the same kind of umbrella, actually. So I'm not a paid shill for Zoom, I can assure you, but when it comes to kind of putting together events like this is something that we've been using really regularly all the way through this year, and it's actually proven to be an incredibly flexible, incredibly responsive little platform. So it's one that to be honest with you, between that and a good camera, it's generally something that people can kind of get to work with dead easy, you know. The other thing to consider is that obviously if you are looking at developing some kind of live streamed content that you develop within your own website, the other thing it's really important to consider is making sure that that website is kind of as optimized and up to date and stuff as it possibly can be. We always say to people the worst thing in the world would be potentially putting an event on with, you know, hundreds of really interested, engaged visitors come and spend time on your website, and then them not being able to capitalize on that, and crucially you guys not being able to capitalize on that and stuff as well, you know. So we always say to people before, you know, you start directing large chunks of traffic into your website potentially for the first time, make sure that everything's, you know, up to date, that the shop is working and all the products you want to sell are available and dead easy for people to find and purchase. Little things like making sure your SSL license is in place, so that obviously any visitors come in are kind of confident in it. You're not going to get any visitors getting a security warning from their browser and being turned away from the event. And obviously make sure that, you know, all of your kind of calls to action and things that you would want people to act on are super visible and really easy for people to find. So make sure that, you know, links to things like your shop, your contact page is really visible. If you've got things like live chat activated on your website, then make sure you've got that turned on and somebody is logged in to answer any questions in real time. And obviously make sure that, you know, you've got the ability for people to sign up to your mailing list, and you've got a method then for contacting them in the future as well. So always be thinking about what kind of steps you need to take to make sure that actually your involvement with your visitors and your audience doesn't end the minute you click end on your live event. Actually you're able to use the event as a way of forming hopefully a more kind of meaningful, engaged relationship with them moving forward. So I wanted to spend a few slides just giving you kind of a few, hopefully fairly straightforward pointers in terms of trying to get the most out of any kind of broadcast or event that you're kind of putting together. I appreciate that, you know, you guys aren't going to have access to, you know, some multi-camera live broadcast crew with a big truck parked outside beaming footage back to somewhere. So with that in mind, it's important to try and take into account a few kind of hopefully fairly straightforward bits of advice and guidance that we always give to people to hopefully make the most of the product that you're putting together. Obviously, the first thing to think about is the lighting, actually, and there's two problems that kind of tend to blight live streams in my experience. The first is them being really dark, as you'll have noticed from the office that I'm calling you guys in from today. It's a little dark in here, so we always try and say to people, try and make sure that you know your scene, quote unquote, that you are broadcasting to people is as well lit as possible. If you're planning on putting your event on at a time of day that facilitates it, then natural light is honestly the best possible thing that you can do. But if not, and you're doing stuff, you know, indoors or in the evening, then have a think about the light sources that are going to be available to you, whether you need to find a way of you know, artificially, you know, increasing the light within your space, opening the curtains, you know, all those kind of, you know, really simple little pointers, but just make sure that generally, without it being too, you know, bright and in your face, that actually it's really clear, really bright, and people can kind of see what's going on and who's talking to them. Obviously, if you are giving an event such as a tour, this is where something like a run through will be really useful, because it gives you an opportunity to investigate how the light changes in different areas and whether you need to, you know, take specific steps in specific areas to make the most of that as well. And kind of linked to that, as we've talked about, while we like to try and make the video element of these live things as bright as possible so people can, see really clearly what's happening, the other thing to try and, take into account as the other part of that equation is the audio side of it, and people being able to hear and understand what you're kind of saying as well. There's no, it would be awful if, you've taken the time to find, say, an expert in local history. He spent the time putting together a really interesting talk and presentation, and turns up at, I don't know, Rockingham Castle for the sake of argument to be able to give that presentation. But actually in that giant room with the echoes and his voice, it becomes really difficult to hear that kind of talk, and in that event, the effectiveness of it gets diluted and you're going to end up with quite a high dropout rate. So we say to people, try and avoid any areas that are particularly noisy. It's not always easy, especially in an outdoor setting. If you're lighting Christmas tree lights and you're broadcasting that to people for the sake of argument, then being outdoors and having that lack of control over noise could be an issue. But if you are inside, then obviously make sure you've turned off things like kind of air conditioning, background music, all of those things that will add extra noise to your audio signal. If you can, try and avoid rooms that are too echoey, for the simple reason that there's nothing worse than trying to decipher what is someone talking and what's the echo of him saying the sentence before. So if you can avoid spaces that are too echoey, it definitely always helps. Obviously, if you can, try and kind of control the area that you're in if possible. People walking past having a conversation that ends up, as part of the broadcast or something, ideally wouldn't be part of something. But, if possible, try and be kind of cognizant of what distractions and potential noise sources there are going to be in play during your broadcast and take steps where you can to try and mitigate those. We always say, and I've got some suggestions for you guys as we get a little further through. But obviously do take the time to check things like your light and the audio in the venue that you are going to be presenting your event in. And if it's something that does require it, or you've got the budget to be able to, then do look at investing in things like perhaps an additional light source or two, or an external microphone or something that again will help you to improve the audio and the visual fidelity of your broadcast, and hopefully make it a much more kind of a bit more of a polished kind of artifact that people can kind of watch and engage with. As we've talked about, the important thing for me is always running kind of a test in the run up to your broadcast and making sure that you can kind of deliver it in the way that you envisage it before people are watching you try and deliver it in real time. Obviously, the crucial thing to try and anticipate when you are kind of doing anything live streamed is that obviously you're going to be kind of completely beholden to the Wi-Fi capabilities of the venue you're in, or if you're in an outdoor setting, the 4G, 5G capabilities of your phone's network as well. So obviously one of the things that's really important when you are kind of going and doing the trial run of your broadcast is to make sure that you've got everything set up technically the way it will be on the day. So if you've got multiple devices that need to be connected to the same Wi-Fi spot, then make sure you test out those current connections at the same time to make sure your Wi-Fi router can handle it. If you're going to have to use the example of broadcasting the Christmas tree lighting, go to the spot in the town square where the Christmas tree is and make sure that you've got good, decent 4G, 5G coverage down there, and that actually the video that gets broadcast from your phone for that particular event actually is going to be watchable and stuff as well. And obviously the other important consideration to make is to kind of test ideally at the same time as day as your event, because obviously the load on the broadband network will be significantly different at different times of the day. I know mine slows down significantly kind of 4 or 5 o'clock generally in the afternoons when everyone's home from work and school and stuff, whereas at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning it's significantly faster. So again, if you've got the opportunity to run your test at the same time of day as your actual event will be, then again it just gives you that opportunity to have that understanding and confidence that when you come to put it to the test in the real world, actually everything's going to work the way it's supposed to and is going to be relatively seamless. Obviously, the other thing a test does is give people the opportunity to, you know, actually run through their lines and maybe their marks if they're giving perhaps a walking tour or something like that for the first time, without having to try and kind of figure it out in real time. Some people aren't as comfortable and as confident kind of talking just off the top of their head to an audience. So, you know, sometimes the opportunity to run through that is a big help for people. Facebook in particular, one, I think YouTube may have the same option. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Facebook offers you the option to stream to just me, where you can essentially set up a live stream that nobody else can see, so that obviously you can test it out and run through it all without prying eyes, or worse, people in the comments box, because there's nothing worse than an internet commenter. And I always say to people on a practical level as well, you know, if it helps, feel free to kind of tape out your marks on the floor, or, you know, put script cards in key locations if it helps as well. All people can see through the window on their computers is what the camera is pointing at, which is in reality going to be your presenter or the event that is happening, you know. So, you know, if you've got the ability to put kind of visual prompts up or anything like that around that frame to make sure that, you know, no one else can see it, but actually you've got a good feel for where you are in the broadcast or what kind of happens next, that again, you've got those very kind of simple prompts to one place, to one side as well. So in terms of a useful shopping list, I thought it'd be useful to kind of give you guys some ideas and notes in terms of just some really simple little tools, really, that will hopefully help to try and give you guys some options to, again, kind of improve things like your lighting, your audio, stuff like that as well. All of these, I should say, are tools that are literally sat in my kind of bags to one side of me in the office here. You know, these are things that I use on a regular basis, day to day. They're all things I've put pricing underneath some of them to give you examples of the kind of investment that we're talking about, but all things that are genuinely readily available and would all make, you know, a marked difference to just a straightforward someone holding a mobile phone to live stream something. So the first thing to think about, obviously, is a tripod. This is self-explanatory, I would hope, from that picture there. But, you know, when you are holding a camera, especially for a long period of time, there's nothing worse than that kind of shake that your arms start to develop after a little while. And as uncomfortable as that is for you, kind of holding a phone potentially and covering some kind of event in a live stream capacity, it's even more uncomfortable for the people sat at home trying to work out what's happening as that kind of camera shake is going on as well. So we always say to people, you know, for a tenner, a tripod is literally the quickest and easiest thing you can do to improve the quality of your end video results, you know, because just having that stability of shot will instantly lift your kind of production value as well. I've got literally two of these three that you can see in front of me here. Obviously, one on the far left has been developed specifically for kind of use on a desktop with a mobile phone, and you can see to the right of that one's got a ring light built into it, which actually gives you that nice kind of selfie glow that you've probably seen on Instagram, you know, when people are taking their pictures. And the third one, obviously, is actually a mobile phone attachment on a standard kind of camera tripod. So again, if you've got maybe a DSLR tripod from a traditional camera that you use at home, you could even put that to work and just buy a little mobile phone adapter for the top as well. Possibly more use for if you've got someone, you know, standing up and delivering a performance or a speech, or if you've got you know, something outside where it's happening you know, off ground level, then again, something with a tripod with a bit of extra height and extension would be a useful way of spending a tenner on there as well. If you are out and about, or potentially kind of walking around delivering tours, those kind of content, this little mobile phone bracket is something I've been using for about 12 months now, actually, and is one of the best £15 I've ever spent. So obviously on its kind of base level, by clipping the phone into the bracket the way you've seen on there and holding it in two hands either side, it actually dramatically increases the stability of the shot coming out of the camera. So all of that kind of really shaky, kind of horrible result that you'd get just kind of walking around, I don't know, a cobbled street, say, you'd get that kind of bumpy effect as the camera shook. You can help to reduce a lot of that, and it really smooths down the stability of that shot using something like this. And the other thing you can see from the bottom left corner is that actually it's really useful for attaching additional accessories and stuff as well. So I've actually got a little light and an additional external microphone that I clip into mine, and you can see all of those kind of accessories fit right on the top, and it essentially gives you kind of a mobile broadcast rig that you've got the ability to have, you know, decent quality sound through it, an increase in light if you're walking through an area that's not particularly well lit. And like I say, for £16, it's something that I've used a lot over the last kind of year, and it's been really useful. In terms of external lighting, there's a few options that are kind of available to you. Obviously, we've talked about natural light being, you know, the best thing. Certainly for outdoor use, it's perfect for kind of light in the scenes. But it's not always possible, and as a result, so there's a range of different options open to you to try and help with that. Obviously, you can see it on the far left. We've got a little clip-on ring light that just sits over the top of your mobile phone, which is obviously ideal if you are doing some kind of a simple broadcast, perhaps direct to your phone from home or something like that. The middle one has got what they call a hot shoe attachment. So that's what usually clips to the top of like a DSLR camera. But in the sake of this argument, you can see the bracket that I showed in this slide has got 3 little slots on the top there. So that's where your light would slot in, and that's got a little adjustable control on the back for varying how light or bright that is. And again, if you were perhaps looking at a slightly more involved production, maybe you were putting on a performance of some musicians or something like that maybe needed to be, you know, really well lit, perhaps you've got quite a big space, something like that, then actually that mobile photography rig that's on the far right there is again a really ideal little option. I bought one of these about 2-3 years ago. The whole thing, the 4 lights and the green screen and everything folds up into a holdall, and you can kind of put it up and down in literally kind of 5-6 minutes as well. So if you're going to be doing something that perhaps requires a little bit more kind of professional production value and needs to be kind of really well lit, or you've got a much kind of bigger scene, or frankly a much, you know, a little bit bigger budget and you can spare 120 quid, then actually something like that is again a really useful kind of addition that you can kind of put in the bag, and again hopefully mean that any space that you turn up to, you know, even the darkest grimmest kind of place, you can make it kind of, you know, nice and well lit and bright and exactly what you need for your purposes. We talked about the audio component of our kind of broadcasts as well. Obviously, you know, the internal microphones that are built into, you know, laptops and phones and stuff these days have gotten much better. And, you know, I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay this evening. I'm just talking into the internal mic on my laptop here. But, you know, there are a range of different options that you can take for little additional external microphones that, again, will give you a much clearer, much more kind of defined and rounded audio signal for people to listen to as well. Something that was maybe a one camera, one presenter broadcast, which was relatively simple, then a little lapel clip-on mic like the one on the left-hand side would be ideal. The one in the middle, again, mounts to the camera bracket that I demonstrated to you guys a few slides ago. So that's something that kind of clips into the headphone port of your mobile phone and effectively supplants the internal microphone. So rather than recording video with what the inbuilt mic is picking up, it uses what's picked up by the external microphone, which is a little bit better quality audio, and like I say, it gives you a slightly better kind of end result as well. Finally, if you are looking at putting together, I don't know, maybe webinar content or regular kind of speaking, presenting content, and you are fixed in the same place, then the Blue Yeti mic on the right-hand side that I've shown you there is, again, a really good, solid, kind of robust all-rounder as well. It's plug and play, just go straight into your kind of computer via USB. And that's another one that gives really good quality audio recordings and stuff as well that you guys can be making use of. The final one is something that will be of niche interest, perhaps to some of you, without knowing whether, you know, musical events and stuff like that is something that is going to be of interest. But I know, you know, I've had requests this year from, you know, choirs, musicians, Christmas carolers that are looking for ways of putting kind of musical events on and stuff. And actually, the key to those, actually, you know, when we're talking, me perhaps being a little bit crackly or lo-fi while I'm just talking to you is one thing, but actually, when you're trying to reproduce, you know, maybe a string quartet or a Christmas choir or something like that, actually the quality of that audio signal will be really important. And making sure that people can hear it and that it sounds good will be the crucial component that keeps people kind of engaged and watching that broadcast, hopefully to the end. And a setup like this actually is something that for kind of £220, again, offers a pretty good accessible kind of entry point to be able to deliver kind of something like that. Essentially, what you've got there is 2 kind of high quality capacitor microphones, which will capture a whole lot of sound in very rich, very kind of detailed quality. And then the box that you can see that sits just in front of the headphones there is just an audio interface that enables those microphones to be converted into a digital signal, and then obviously combined with your video signal to give your final live broadcast. So again, something that is potentially of niche interest to some of you. I don't know, again, without a kind of a show of hands, if kind of musical based events is something that you guys are going to be interested in. But yeah, again, I think something like that, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to put together, then again, something like that is a really good kind of solid investment that you can be making. In terms of other tools that we always kind of recommend to people, obviously we've recommended a few little bits of hardware and stuff there that can be really useful for improving the quality of your actual live broadcast. But there's a few tools that we always kind of recommend people look at putting into their toolkit as well, really to try and make them make the most of the whole kind of process of planning and developing events like this. Obviously, the first one will be a social media scheduler, something like Buffer, Hootsuite, Orca. There are innumerable packages available for you guys at different price points, including crucially free. Most of these platforms offer a free level for people to get involved with, but we've talked about the importance of being consistent and really regular with your social media and promotion and stuff in the run up to these kind of events. So making sure that you've got the tools at your disposal to do that is really important. In terms of social media monitoring, we think this is also a really important part of the puzzle, really. It's one thing to have the tools at your disposal to be able to kind of publish content and put stuff into those spheres, but actually understanding what people are saying about your event and those kind of things is also a really important part of the equation, really, in terms of being able to generate engagement and hopefully kind of lead the conversation in the run up to it as well. So one app that we've been using quite a lot this year is an app called Mention, and that's a really good one for tracking all kinds of different platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, a whole range, and that can track on usernames, on keywords, on hashtags. So yeah, that's one that if you're going to be doing a lot of social media activity, it definitely feels like a good companion app to add to your phones and your desktops, to be able to actually see how effective any of that activity is being, and what people are actually kind of saying about your event as a result. If possible, I always suggest to people having some kind of a tool at your disposal for creating some kind of graphics is really useful. Obviously, Photoshop is the idiomatic name that everybody knows, but there are loads of packages from Spark by Adobe to one called Canva, which some of you may have come across in your day-to-day already. But these are really useful, really powerful, free kind of graphics packages that you guys can be using to put together to create things like posters, social media posts, all those kind of assets and materials that you might be wanting to make use of in the promotion of your events as well. If you're going to be selling tickets to any kind of happening or event that you're looking to put together, then obviously you're going to need some kind of ticketing solution put in place. Two that we use fairly regularly with people over the last few years have been Eventbrite, which I know is a very popular one, but we've got another one called Ticket Tailor that we've worked with as well. Works in a very similar way to Eventbrite, but does also have a few other little kind of extra bits as well that you can have a look at. But obviously, yeah, that's something that you guys are going to need to put into place right off the bat. And kind of tied to that, really, we always say to people, really useful to make sure you've got some kind of a mailing platform in place as well, whether that be MailChimp, Constant Contact, some way of getting back in touch with your kind of customers and people that are buying tickets and stuff after the fact. It might be that you've got to deliver links, information about how to join the event, post-event follow-ups, special events, special follow-up messages for kind of future events, stuff like that. So actually making sure that having captured people for your event that you're looking to put in place and kind of mobilize that data moving forward, then yeah, make sure you've got some kind of a system in place to be able to very quickly and easily put all those newly sourced contacts into place and again, reach out and start to hopefully develop some good relationships with these guys. A video editing software, we always say to people, is something that may be really useful, especially if you're planning on making content available after the fact. You know, if you wanted to record a little webinar and then make it available later, then yeah, a video editing software is a great way of being able to cut out that 5-minute period at the start when people are joining and the questions at the end. And, you know, maybe there was a lag in the middle where there was a technical issue. The video editing software enables you to cut all of that out and put quite a polished, finished kind of article online afterwards. And, you know, Premiere Rush is a package that's available from Adobe. That's a free package that you can be using. Or there's iMovie baked into Apple products and stuff as well. So there are a number of really simple entry-level packages that you guys can very quickly get to grips with and start to create those kind of video content afterwards. Obviously, if you're looking to pre-record and stuff as well, then obviously video editing software is a great way of making sure that that finished clip is as smooth and polished as possible and stuff as well, you know. So if that's kind of one way that you're looking at delivering these events, then certainly do be looking at some kind of video editing software as well. And again, if you are pre-recording, you've got that luxury, then we always say to people to experiment with an auto cue as well. There are a number of really good auto cue apps available within the app shops, and obviously the great thing about those is not only does it keep you kind of on point and make sure that you don't kind of forget anything or, you know, say the wrong thing at the wrong time, but the auto cue actually helps to focus your eye on the camera itself. So actually it keeps your eyes in exactly the right place, so, you know, it seems like you're talking to all the people kind of on the webinar or the event all at the same kind of time and stuff as well, you know. So definitely have a look for an auto cue app as well. Certainly if you are perhaps a little nervous with getting onto camera for the first time, or again, perhaps you've got a lot of points that you want to get through. And finally, as we've alluded to, make sure that the rest of your kind of online offering is in order as well and stuff, you know. Make sure that all your kind of social media profiles are active and updated. Make sure that your website's updated and optimized as much as possible. And that crucially, obviously, you know, if we're gathering interest and getting people coming in to see us for these particular events that we're delivering, that actually we're advertising future installments of those events and stuff as well, you know, and that hopefully this is, you know, the first step in a kind of an ongoing relationship with people. So just to round up, and you'll notice that I've started to speak a little quicker as we've gone on, because I'm very conscious that we're now ticking through the time, but I just wanted to lay out briefly some brief examples for you guys today of some scenarios that people have specifically brought to me this year, actually, for kind of creating online events and stuff, and just to give you an idea of kind of how simple and straightforward putting together kind of events like these can be with exactly the tools that we've kind of just put in front of you over the last kind of hour or so. So the first one might be the scenario of a musician or a songwriter that wants to deliver, say, a private concert to his fans to a limit of 100 people from his private studio. In 10 years ago, something like that would have actually been a really kind of complicated undertaking to try and put something like that together. But actually these days, we tend to find something like a simple Zoom room is actually more than sufficient for the purpose that you're looking for. Obviously, in that kind of setup, the first thing you want to have in place is some kind of ticketing software so that you've got the ability to sell those tickets and generate the revenue for your event. But obviously, crucially, make sure that you've set the capacity at the right level as well, and make sure that you're only selling, you know, the requisite 100 tickets that the artist has specifically requested. Obviously, it gives you the ability to set that room up kind of in private and share a private Zoom link with people, so that actually only your kind of ticket holders is allowed in. And then obviously once the 100 people are in the room and the event is kind of ongoing, next thing we do obviously is then close the waiting room to make sure that the capacity stays at the 100 that we want to keep it at. And we always say to people, obviously, when you're putting events and stuff like this together in this way, that obviously the number one thing you can do for future use is make sure that you record that show as well, because obviously the clips and examples of how that event played out and what people can expect is actually the kind of one of the number one selling tools for you guys when it comes to selling future installments of this series of events, perhaps, or getting people interested in the next one. Obviously, the use, as we've talked about, of a simple audio face, as described a couple of slides back, ensures that actually even relatively straightforward things like, as we gave the example of, you know, a string quartet or something like that, you can end up with a really good kind of quality user experience. Obviously, in a setting like this, where, you know, a musician or someone is going to have their hands full for the duration of the broadcast, then making sure that obviously, you know, someone is on hand to engage with people and to deal with any kind of technical issues issues that come up along the way is crucial. Obviously, making sure that all of the calls to action throughout, you know, buy tickets, buy merchandise, and all that kind of stuff are all super kind of visible and clearly kind of pointed out to people during the broadcast and stuff as well, to make sure that actually the kind of the earning potential of that event is increased on top of the actual kind of top line ticket sales that you guys can potentially bring in as well. So option 2, we've looked at the scenario of a town council that might want to deliver a publicly accessible virtual Christmas fair, say, to showcase a range of local businesses on a particular night. So in this instance, again, something that it feels to me like that Facebook Live and that Facebook ecosystem is actually absolutely perfect for something like this, to deliver a really useful kind of self-contained experience for people. Obviously, Facebook's got a massive audience, and you know, a large percentage of your kind of local audience and visitors will already be on there, and likely at the time that you're running some kind of a virtual event will likely be on Facebook at the same time, you know. And obviously from a business point of view, the advantage of doing something within a platform like Facebook is that the majority of those local businesses will already have their own pages set up, their own online stores set up and active as well. So actually that user journey of bringing people into an event and hopefully having them capitalize on that and go out, you know, engage with these businesses, buy a product from them and support them and stuff as well, that whole kind of journey is really self-contained and really easy for people to take, because within a few clicks they can be within the online element, the online store element of that business's Facebook page, and buy in the thing that they want with Apple Pay. So the whole thing can take just a couple of minutes and stuff, you know. Obviously, the beauty of running an event like this on something like Facebook is that you've got, as we kind of alluded to, a multitude of different ways to promote it in terms of, you know, the different kinds of content, polls, countdowns, story-based content that you can be sharing on a daily basis as well. And obviously crucial, given that the event is public and that, you know, we want as many eyeballs on it as possible, there's no kind of need or requirement to kind of block access to it and stuff as well. So given that, you know, Facebook is the behemoth that it is, if 20,000 people suddenly descend on your, you know, Rushden virtual Christmas fair, actually it's fine, you know, that infrastructure will stay in place, and as many people will be able to join that broadcast as possible without anything falling over. In terms of how we've, you know, personally seen this kind of approach rolled out over the years, we've seen a couple of different options, even locally actually, certainly within the last year. I don't know if any of you guys have checked out the NN online food market at any point this year. But they've been doing kind of a series of events, usually on a Saturday afternoon, I think, where they get a lot of food and drink producers together to kind of showcase them on a set timetable. And quite often there, they will kind of pre-program the updates from all of the businesses in advance, and then publish those bits of content on a regular schedule, so whether that be 9:05, 9:10, 9:15, and obviously businesses that are users, I should say, that track the hashtag or you know, are spending time on the Facebook page, see those new bits of content as and when they're kind of added through the evening. Obviously, you know, for the other alternative to that is a slightly more chaotic approach potentially, but we've also seen events run this year where actually all of the businesses take on kind of temporary admin rights to the page and schedule their own kind of 5-minute Facebook Live sessions as well, you know. So actually at 9:10 we hand over to Ben at So Very Creative, and he spends 5 minutes, you know, touring the office and explaining to you guys what I do and shouting out my website before I close my broadcast down, and you know, John from, I don't know, XYZ Cake Company gets on and starts telling people about his business and stuff. Well, you know, obviously you've got a couple of options within that kind of setup to do it. Obviously, as we've talked about, you can pre-record your videos and schedule them all at a particular time, or again, if you've got people that are kind of happy to talk as live to camera, then again, more than happy. It's very easy to kind of give people the access they need to do that, and just kind of give them their 5 minutes of fame at the requisite time. Worth kind of saying as well, it's you know, more than feasible to combine both of those approaches actually for some of these events. It might be that actually you want to pre-schedule all of your updates from your local businesses in advance, but actually have a live element of a Christmas tree lighting, to use that example and stuff again, you know. So however you chose to kind of tackle something like this, there's something like, you know, Facebook seems like the perfect kind of format to be able to work with. And finally, not one that I've personally been involved with, but something that I watched a variant of a couple of weeks ago. I put together a scenario of a local theatre group that might want to put on a virtual pantomime for the local community, again, with no limit on attendance as well. Now, what we've kind of recommended in this kind of scenario is a kind of a method whereby you can actually use a combination of Zoom and Facebook to deliver a really interesting kind of experience for people as you go. So our first step in kind of putting together an event like this would be obviously to set up kind of a Zoom room that only the performers in the pantomime in this example have got access to. Obviously, what that gives you is kind of a limit on the 10 actors that we know are going to be seen and heard on screen at any time. Obviously, what you can do then with the kind of the pro and the upgraded levels of Zoom is take the live stream from that private Zoom room and make it accessible on Facebook and YouTube as well for people, so that actually lots of people can dial in and kind of watch the event within the platforms of Facebook and YouTube if they want to. But by kind of conducting the event itself within Zoom, you completely take away the risk or any risk of that performance being kind of disrupted. Someone's dog goes crazy on a microphone and interrupts the performance stuff. You actually haven't got any of that, because you can control the quote unquote performance part of the ecosystem completely separately, and just make that live stream element available to people so that they can then tune in on kind of Facebook and YouTube as well moving forward. Obviously, if tickets are required, then a ticketing platform will need to be put in place. Obviously, where you've got ticketed events and actually you've got kind of quite a private audience that you want to be able to make that stream available to, then obviously what you might want to do is set up kind of private YouTube links or private Facebook groups that people can access to be able to get to that stream, which obviously again enables you to make sure the only people tuning in are the ones that have hopefully paid for a ticket and entitled to be there. So I can assure you we're definitely getting to the last few slides now. In terms of making our event a success, just a few slides on the things we always recommend to people to try and make the most of it. Obviously, as we've talked about, identify the key questions early on and start to get your battle plan in place as early as possible. If you've got an event that you're looking to put on at 2 weeks before Christmas, now's the time to be putting that action plan together. And obviously, as we've alluded to, making sure that is kind of widely shared and understood by all parties that are kind of involved in the event with you. Make sure you've got your testing period built in, and you've got time to be able to react to any kind of findings that come from that testing. And honestly, I always say to people, sod's law, just assume that something will go wrong. Something generally has a way of doing so, but all of the kind of the methods and the tools and stuff that we've looked at today, and that are kind of available on all of these platforms, are something that is completely easily kind of replicable and fixable. In reality, no kind of massive issues that you're going to going to kind of come up against day to day, short of the Wi-Fi going out or a power cut or something, should ultimately derail you. As we talked about, really important to find the right time and date for your event if you can. Do some research on the proposed date that you're looking to do it. Is there anything happening online or in the real world that's notable at that time? Last Tuesday with the US election is not a day I would have wanted to try and put on an online event for people, with the amount of distractions that are going on with people. But just check and make sure, are there any big ticket distractions that are going to keep people from wanting to kind of join and be a part of my event? If you get the chance, consult with the audience, ask for their input. You can use things like the polls that are available within social media to get a feel for, what time would you guys like to see this event? When would you, when do you want to see it? And again, you can use things like your analytics and your user dashboards and things like Twitter and Facebook and stuff to actually find out quite easily when your users are most online and when a large percentage of your social media audience are most active. And if you can, always advise, try and lean into that. If you know that Thursday evening 7 till 9 is your most active time on social media, then do your event at 7 o'clock on Thursday night and lean into that and try and kind of meet your audience halfway. Obviously, depending on the audience and where you're hoping people will join you from, potentially look at considering kind of international time zones and stuff as well. But I'm assuming potentially certainly to start with, we're maybe looking at kind of a local audience, certainly. But as I say, it is one of the great upticks about doing stuff in a virtual format like this is that it does open up visitors and eyeballs from all over the world. You know, I was talking to Kenneth at Oundle International Festival literally this morning, who did their festival virtually this year because obviously they couldn't get people together. And they found actually the demand from all over the world has been incredible in terms of people watching the streams and inquiring about tickets and stuff for next year that they would have literally never been able to kind of come across before and stuff. So actually while there is, you know, a primary kind of local audience for this stuff, obviously, yeah, do consider that there are potential kind of eyeballs elsewhere in the world as well. And finally, obviously, promote. You know, we've talked about the importance of it, and I know I sound a bit like a broken record, but be sure that you're putting all of the tools that are available at your disposal to good use. You know, make sure you're using all the different bits of functionality within your chosen social media platforms. Even if you're putting the event on Facebook, be sure to be utilizing things like Facebook and Twitter so that your audiences there know about the event as well. Make sure that you're, you know, mobilizing your email lists and replicating that effort with partners. So, you know, if you're working with 3 or 4 organizations to do something, make sure they're hitting their social media and their emails and stuff as well. Make sure you're, you know, creating things like calendar markers, Facebook events, iCal reminders and stuff so that people can very quickly add it into their diary and make sure that it's something that, you know, their phone pops up, oh, virtual event in 20 minutes and stuff, you know, and you've got all of those kind of things helping to push people towards you as well. And then obviously, you know, using things like hashtags will make it really easy for people to kind of find the content, talk about it, hopefully share it, and gives you a really kind of easy way of being able to go, right, I'll track that hashtag that I've created for my event now, and then, you know, at a glance I'll be able to see hopefully what people are saying about it as well. So like I say, I know I've mentioned it kind of a few times, but that kind of promotional side of it and keeping that at the forefront of your mind is really, for me, one of the most important things to think about when we're looking at this. And finally, we talked about obviously engaging in the run up to your event, but obviously do be sure to engage in real time as well. Use things like the comments, reply to people, thank people for joining them. You know, if people ask questions, then answer those questions, stuff like that. Keeping people engaged and being part of the conversation is one of the most important things you can do to make sure that people get all the way from the start to the end of your event and get the most out of it. So whether it be, you know, yourself or, you know, a case of bringing in somebody to be a part of that broadcast with you, anything that you can do to help with that engagement is super important. In terms of a final kind of post-event checklist, obviously, when you've actually delivered your event, we always say to people, you know, to make sure you take the time to kind of take stock and understand what worked and what didn't. You know, you can find raw data in your analytics that tells you whether it was a success in terms of visitor numbers, how many people stayed till the end, how many people shared the information about the event or brought other people in. And again, you can use things like social media and stuff like that to actually generate some really nice kind of soft anecdotal kind of feedback from people as well in terms of what you could do better, what people enjoyed, what people might like to see for future events and stuff like that as well. And obviously, if you are in the luxurious position of you've got your users and audience generating content and talking about it, obviously make sure that you share that and let people know about that within your audience as well. And again, just keep that narrative going, you know, if this was a great event, we're really looking forward to the next one, and that actually they all hopefully start to kind of snowball into a regular series of maybe interesting kind of engaging events for people. So that concludes my slides for this evening. I've got two slides to just run through with you very quickly before I take questions. I had a phone call literally about an hour before I jumped on this call with you this evening to mention that Wellingborough Council and East Northants Council are about to unveil a new package of support for businesses locally, which might be of interest to some of you. Now, this is a package that is going to be awarded to 25 businesses from East Northants, 25 from Wellingborough, and qualifying businesses will get, apparently, they'll be awarded membership to the Enterprise Nation community, which gives you access to advice services, access to the Amazon Small Business Accelerator, peer-to-peer networking and stuff like that. And also this year, as well as the membership, they're giving away, I believe, 50 slots at their own online event at Christmas time for businesses to promote themselves to the UK and stuff as well. So if any of you guys are interested in getting involved, the guys had asked me to mention it to you today, because a big part of what the Enterprise Nation team do is all about kind of upskilling people online and helping you to develop this kind of stuff. So if you guys are of interest, then there's an email address at the bottom for James Tennant at East Northamptonshire Council. As I say, the closing date is fairly soon. It's the 27th of November, and I believe they are reviewing, closing the applications on the 27th and reviewing them on a first come, first serve basis. So I believe the first 50 qualifying businesses will be the ones that will be eligible for those 50 awards. There's a link here that you guys will be able to kind of take down and copy as well. But I will share these slides via Karen Williams after this event today. So obviously, if you keep an eye out for this slide to you in the next day or so from Karen, then obviously you'll be able to follow that link through as well. And if you've got any questions, obviously James Tennant, his email address is there, and he's more than happy to take any questions that you guys have got about the scheme and what it entails. So that was kind of a heads up from the guys at East Northants Council to let you know about that. But with that in mind, I'm going to draw breath for 2 seconds and ask if anybody got any immediate questions. I mean, obviously, more than happy to take questions offline, and I'll put my contact details up there so that obviously if people want to reach out to me kind of separately or anything, you're more than welcome to. But did anyone have any kind of immediate questions in the short term?